Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, October 17th, and this week, an overhyped event. The dirty truth about lockouts, and Uber looks to Tesla. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, although it's Thursday today, isn't it?
Oh, it's Thursday. I said happy. I'm so used to doing this on Friday. Yes, we are doing it early this week. I apologize. I'm all over the place today. But yes, happy Thursday. For me, it's Friday. For you, it's Thursday.
We'll call it early Friday.
Early Friday, as we've said before. Great stories this week. Definitely continue with some of the stuff we talked about last week. But before we get started with that, I do want to give again a shout out to the Gig Economy podcast. They call themselves an infotainment podcast that streams every week at 8 p.m. Eastern. They cover a lot of the same stuff we do, current topics, news, issues with gig workers and drivers. And Brian, I know you've also been on discussing accidents and injuries as well. They're all around great guys.
Yeah, it's a great listen, definitely worth checking out. We appreciate the topics they talk about. Like you said, it's similar to us, but the more information, the better. The more perspectives, the better. So definitely check these guys out.
Yeah, so they're great, and the links are in the description below, as well as some of the former videos as well. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, and all the other podcasts. So please check them out. They're great guys. But without further ado, we're going to get into the stories this week. A lot of these are a continuation from some of the things we've seen, but with some updates, juicy updates. We'll start with the first one. We Robot leaves questions. And the Tesla event left more questions than answers. This is from the Wall Street Journal. And they reported, quote, the gathering was apparently for Tesla to unveil a robotaxi vehicle and related service. But it was light on details about the cars and included even less about the service. Tesla's chief executive, Elon Musk, spent barely 20 minutes on stage after arriving nearly an hour late. Tesla shareholders were flummoxed. That's it? Disappointing lack of detail, read the headline of a report Friday by the Morgan Stanley analyst Adam Jones, a noted Tesla bull. Someone else reported 20-minute robotaxi event concludes 6 months of Uber event worry. This is from Justin Post of Bank of America Securities, noted to the clients. He also said Tesla's toothless taxi is a best case outcome for Uber. Brian, this is sort of what we've been saying. The event happened on last Friday, so we talked about it. It was arriving. Pretty much what we were saying. We didn't know what they were going to unveil, and when you say something like Tesla's toothless taxi, that's not good on the future of what they're trying to do here.
No, that is not a great review. That's the equivalent of 2 thumbs down, I think. This is it's an example of the big companies pushing something before it's ready. It's not a surprise to me that Elon Musk is creating a whole bunch of hoopla and trying to get people amped up. And then at the end of the day, they put out a big event and try to get people excited about the technology. And eventually it may be something to be excited about, but it's just not ready yet. And there's not much to say because there's not much that it can do. We know that we're putting these cars on the road. We know that there's these advances in the technology where we're getting closer and closer to a self-driving car, an autonomous vehicle, but the driver's still necessary and the safety checks are not in place and the technology is not ready to put these vehicles on the road as replacements for every individual car and every individual driver. So, ultimately, I think Elon is trying to get the public ready. They're trying to get excitement behind what's to come. Like I said a couple of seconds ago, eventually we'll be there, but it's toothless. It's not ready. It's not time. So let's push the brakes. Let's wait until the technology is there, safe, ready to go. And then maybe we have one of these big events when it's actually time to deploy these things in a safe and responsible way.
Yeah, and they even, he again is talking about the cyber cab as kind of the big focus on top of the Teslas. They even say, look, he has to get those produced first. And also, they need to be certified for the full unsupervised self-driving. They don't have that yet, like the Waymo, and that is a multi-year process. So just like you said, with Musk claiming, hey, this will be out by next year, a lot of the analysts and people in the AV EV industry are saying, no, it's a multi-year deal. I mean, it's taken, again, things are evolving, but it took Waymo like 6 or 7 years to get there. And, they're barely there. So it's exactly like what you're saying. But yeah, it's really interesting stuff. But we will see, as always. I am curious to see how the cybercabs actually, when they come out, they look very interesting. So I'm curious to see when those actually roll out. But we'll move on to the next story, which is a really wild story. This is about the driver lockouts that happened in New York City, and they really were nothing short of devastating. There's new investigations by Bloomberg that really detail what happened and how it affected drivers. I really recommend people read this. It's a very long, detailed story, but I'm going to jump into a little bit of the highlights here. So Bloomberg reported, under a local law, drivers are supposed to be paid even for the time they spend between trips. But Uber and Lyft found a money-saving loophole, simply prevent them from logging into the apps, erasing some of their working time from the record. Because these so-called lockouts happen without warning and can last anywhere from several minutes to several hours, drivers have had to work longer to keep their wages up, and in many cases they can't. So basically, by making drivers seem busier on paper, the companies set themselves up to save as much as hundreds of millions of dollars in driver payouts, according to one of the estimates from Bloomberg, all while telling drivers falsely that the lockouts were required because of law. It's also affected riders by keeping drivers locked out in surge zones. The rideshare companies further limited the supply of drivers in a way that many have led to higher prices for passengers. Of the 3,700 screenshots of lockouts with a discernible location collected for this investigation, more than 430 were reported by drivers near a surge zone. This whole thing is much worse than we ever anticipated, and Bloomberg really got the core of it. And I'll tell you, devastating is the only word I can think of.
Yeah, that's the word that comes to mind for me as well. And this article is definitely worth a read. We're not going to be able to cover all the detail that's in this thing during this show, but it really lays out what the companies were doing, why they were doing it, and how it was affecting the entire rideshare community, drivers and riders alike. In looking at this, you see how the company is taking what was meant to be a driver benefit, this law that was passed, requiring that drivers make a certain amount of money, that they're paid for the time that they're working, and just turning it on its head. Nothing about the spirit of the law was followed by the company's actions. By dictating when drivers could be on the app, by randomly cutting them off and essentially pushing them from their working hours, from their working time, we're seeing that Uber's actually exerting a lot of control, and that could be a problem for them in lawsuits down the road. So much of Uber and Lyft's business model has been saying, we don't control driver time, we don't control driver actions. Well, by kicking them off the app for periods and by dictating when they can log on, when they can't, they're actually beginning to look like a more employer-employee based system. So this could end up backfiring for Uber in the long run, but in the short term, it was devastating to driver income. It was devastating to riders who were forced to pay higher fares because surges were up or wait longer times to get in a ride. I can't see how this was what the legislature and the governments had in mind when they passed these laws to try to benefit drivers and try to make the system better for the working class. Ultimately, Uber just turned that on its head and made it exactly what it wanted it to be, hurting everybody else in the process.
Yeah, it really, again, you really should read this article because it goes into a lot of data. This is not, they didn't just speak to a couple drivers and say, well, here's the outcome. There's thousands of screenshots, minimum of hundreds of drivers they interviewed. They broke down all the data. They even admit, look, we don't even have the finite details. We only have what we can estimate because Uber and Lyft obviously hold most of the data. But in the end, like you said, there is nothing about this that was good for anyone except Uber and Lyft. And it shows by doing this how much money they saved versus just paying the drivers what they're supposed to be paid.
Right.
You can't see this ending well. And I don't know how they're going to get around this. Like you said, with the lawsuits are probably going to come if they keep doing this. It might be the only reason they stop doing it, because they
Yeah.
realize that at least at the moment they can't get away with it. Now we've seen in the past they basically can write their own laws and get them passed, like Prop 22. Maybe they'll try something with the lockouts with that, but for now, they can't get away with it.
Yeah, just one more point on it. This changes the whole business model and structure on both sides. So the part of the article talks about, because the lockouts can happen without warning and can last anywhere from several minutes to several hours, it totally upends the driver's ability to control their schedule. If a driver's saying, and thinking, okay, I'm going to go drive from 8 p.m. to midnight because that's when I have free time in my family, where it's after dinner, I've put the kids to bed, this is where I'm going to make my money. And then all of a sudden they're locked out during that period. They then have to change their schedule to drive during times that are less convenient for them. That totally changes the gig work mentality. It changes the business model. It changes everything for both the company and the driver. And if this is how the companies are going to operate, they're going to have to get used to the negatives of having more control over their workforce, which may include benefits, which may include paid time off, which includes employee benefit structures that they've never had to pay before. So while they may be saving money in the short term, if they continue to act this way, I'm predicting that there's going to be employment lawsuits and labor strikes and things of that nature that are going to cost them in the long.
Yeah, 100%. And mark my words, I'm saying this now, and maybe we'll be able to cut back to this later in a couple months. Uber and Lyft especially are cooking up something. I don't think they're just going to roll over on this. They're going to find a way to pull this off. It's going to be a battle, but we've seen it before. So just keep an eye out. Make sure that you're aware of what's going on. Make sure you vote appropriately for what you need to. But we'll see. I mean, it's just like you said, this is a hot topic that's going to get hotter. And I just think it's not over yet. And we will see, as I always say. We're going to end up into the final story here. Uber is looking to Tesla. Uber's CEO has hinted about a Tesla collab, and this is from the Business Insider. They reported, quote, Uber CEO says going head-to-head with Elon Musk can be tough, so he's open to partnering with him. He said to the Financial Times that he would love to offer Tesla's robotaxis on Uber's ride-hailing platform when they are safe and ready to use. He sees three potential paths for Uber once Tesla launches its robotaxis. One, competing with EV giant. Two, working with his company to have the AV vehicles on his network. Or three, combining the two. Now, I hate to say I told you so, but I literally said this maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that I had a feeling that he was going to hint at doing this. There's also something really interesting about, and I know I brought this up a couple months ago about Uber CEO. He likes to tell his strategic decisions on the press. He does this a lot, where he kind of shows you what he's going to do in front of the press to see how they feel in the news, and then goes ahead with it. So pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. And I do recall you called this out. I think it was last week, actually, that this may be coming. And it makes sense from Uber's perspective, because they have been talking about ways that they can get into autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars for as long as I can remember. They have made it's not been a secret at all that they want to get out of the driver business. That's why they do things like the lockouts that we talked about before. They don't care about how the drivers feel about the job. They don't care about doing right by the drivers in a lot of ways. What they care about is maximizing their profits. And the best way for them to do that is to get the driver out of the vehicle. And if they can't create their own self-driving cars, it makes sense for them to be looking for partners who may be able to do so in the relatively near future. So all these stories kind of intersect. We talk about what Tesla's trying to do from a technology perspective in the first story. We talk about how drivers are getting screwed by Uber in the second story. And now the third story is kind of putting a bow on everything. Oh, hey, Uber may be looking to get out of the driver business and into the Tesla self-driving car business themselves. So it is the cherry on top. It is the theme that's going through all these different current events. And is it a surprise to me? No, not at all.
Yeah, and he even says, which I agree with, he said, he doesn't think this is going to be a winner-take-all industry. There's going to be some crossovers. and we're seeing it already, and they're putting the pieces in place. So, as time goes on, these stories will evolve, and we will see what happens with Uber and Tesla, and maybe even a new competitor. Maybe Lyft will join in some way. We'll see. But that is the stories for this week. And before we head off into the weekend for me, you have tomorrow, of course, Friday. Brian, I'll give you the final say.
Yeah, before we head into the long weekend for Jared, we always like to remind everybody that Legal Rideshare is available for free consultations should you ever find yourself in an accident or injured in a rideshare or gig-related activity. We help people collect everything from the cost of medical treatment to lost wages, pain and suffering. Any damages that you sustain, we're going to be able to fight to get you compensated for. So please visit us at our website, legalrideshare.com. You can always find us on social media. Do not hesitate to reach out. Cases don't get better with time. Give us a call right away.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And as I always like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.